You've talked a lot about mental health issues for a long time. There's obviously a lot of countries that have people with mental health challenges. There's not a lot of countries that have the kind of gun violence that we have here. Is there anything new related to guns as president that you would want to see done?
You know, Anderson, I don't think on a federal level there's a lot more left to do. I do think that the states handle these things in different ways, and my state certainly handles it much different than, let's say, Oklahoma handles it. I think each state's governor has to be challenged to do that. If I thought there was a federal solution, I would consider it, and there may be something that comes when I'm president that I'd be willing to consider. But I also know that if we start to degrade our respect for the Constitution, that, just because it's the Second Amendment, it's adjacent to the First.
You said back then, in today's society, no one needs a semi-automatic assault weapon. Do you think people need them now?
It's not about need or not. See, I love that you used that quote. I know which one you were going to use, but I'm glad you used that one. That's the naivete of a 29-year-old. It's not about need. It's a right. They have a right under the Second Amendment. And
in short, that was really bad. Not really bad from the point of view of a Republican necessarily. Strategically, I understand why Christie would say what he said. In theory, saying that people can't, strap multiple bazookas to their shoulders is, I guess, a deal breaker in Republican electoral politics. But from the point of view of the brand that Chris Christie is trying to put together, that seems weaselly. Chris Christie's clearly a guy that doesn't care about guns, and he's also a guy who knows something about the law and the Constitution, but on this topic, he apparently has read the Republican room, and he realized that he needs to pretend that that's not true, that he doesn't know anything about the Constitution or about people's rights. He doesn't know anything about the role of the executive branch or the federal government generally when it comes to guns. And when I say that, I don't think that that's an unfair characterization of his brand. He says that he's like a truth teller. He's not saying what he honestly believes there, but much more importantly, because I can't prove that, I'm not a psychic or whatever, it's just my intuition. He believes that he'll be a leader. He'll be a strong, vigorous executive. But I have no idea what role the government would have in any of this. Now look, I don't think that he's being super honest there, in that he has left room for him to sign some sort of gun control bill if that happens. Let's say that the Democrats take over in 2024 and Chris Christie becomes president. I don't know how both of those things, or even either of those things, would happen, but let's say that it did. He said, maybe there'll be something that comes across my desk. Because I think that he actually believes that more gun control is constitutional and would be beneficial in America, but he doesn't have the boldness to actually say it, and that's where it undercuts his brand. He wants to pitch himself as someone who's going to do like the Straight Talk Express, but on some areas, and we'll get to this when it comes to abortion, he's definitely being careful because he's worried about what Republicans would think about his answers. Specifically, though, his response was terrible. He said mental health is not some sort of unique problem to America. Do we not do enough about it? Definitely. Does any Republican who says we should focus on mental health care ever actually then do that? No, it's an evasion. And specifically, the reason that we wanted to include that reference to the AR-15 there is when he says it's not about what you want, it's about a right. You have the right under the Constitution to have that. No, that's just not what the Constitution says. The Constitution does not, and I checked to make sure, include the term AR-15 or assault weapon. It doesn't say that that should be allowed. It doesn't say that more should be allowed. It doesn't say that less should be allowed. It's vague, and thus it needs to be interpreted. And it is. It's interpreted by the legislature. It's interpreted by the courts. That's just the way it is. To simply say, well, I guess you can have it. It's your right. Okay, but you also obviously accept that we draw the line somewhere. Should I be able to strap like a ton of cannons that spray Agent Orange off the front of my car? No, I think we can all agree that I shouldn't. Well, why? It's arms. The Second Amendment says I should have arms. This is the stereotypical thing. Clearly, there's some limit. Where do we draw it? And for a guy who's going to go on to say in his answer about abortion that consensus is what's important, suddenly he's not remotely interested in what people think about all this. But basically, the signal that he's giving there is maybe he'd do something if the Democrats passed it, but expect no leadership whatsoever from Chris Christie. Just expect that if he became president, we would continue to have horrendous mass shootings on a weekly basis.